What's going on, H2O Army? Joseph from H2O Plants. Today we are talking about the top 3 things that you need to have a successful planted tank. So stay tuned to check that out. If you're new here, consider hitting the subscribe button and enlisting in the H2O Army. Also hit the bell icon to make sure you join our elite notification squad. So this is a question that comes up more and more every time either I'm live streaming, either I get a DM on Instagram, Facebook, anything like that. People asking, I need help. What do I need to have a successful planted tank? Or, you know, I tried plants a long ago, didn't have too much success with it. So I just need some tips to try and help me figure it out. And I answer it all the time, almost the same exact way. Step 1, lighting. So lighting is a very in-depth topic, but these are just some very basic things. You have really 2 kinds of lighting. You have LED and you have fluorescent. Now, I'm a big LED guy myself just because of the price that it takes to run the lights, because as you can see, we have all of these tanks around me. To run these all at fluorescence would just be too much on my electric bill. LED helps cut that down significantly, even though they do cost slightly more. The good thing about LED, you don't have to replace the bulbs every 6 months to a year, depending on what kind they are, but eventually they do lose their intensity and will need to be replaced eventually. That typically lasts anywhere between 3 and 5 years. So you really, you pay a little more up front, but you get a little more shelf life out of the light itself, and it reduces your electric bill. Now, if you're running, 1 or 2 tanks, fluorescent might be a better way to do it, but I use LEDs just because, like I said, I have so many tanks. So if it was one thing that you were going to put money into when you're setting up your tank, it's going to be a good light. It could be really any sort of light, like I said, but I use these Fluval 2.0s that I have on all these grow out tanks. Now, I do have a few other lighting options that I use, so let's take a look at those. So these are the Shrimp King LED lights that come on the Shrimp King tank from Denarelli. And while this isn't a tremendous planted tank and there isn't a whole lot going on here, I did put some dwarf sedge here, and I did have some plants up here, and it's keeping them alive for the most part. This is having a little bit of issue, but I think that's because of humidity issues and whatnot, not necessarily lighting. So all in all, those lights are fine. Next, on the Fluval Flex tank, it comes with a stock light. That's a LED option. Pretty much really easy. It does grow plants, and the water does look brown because we added some stuff to it. Don't mind that. Next up is a Twin Star light that I have running on this tank, which you guys will soon see what's going on here in a future video. But this Twin Star light is very powerful. It can pretty much grow anything at a pretty decent height, and all in all is pretty good. Next up, we have a setup like this. We have a little shop light here that's just clipped on growing moss. Now, there is a little browning. That's to be expected because sometimes the Java moss has to adapt to your tank and you will lose some of it, and Honey's trying to make a cameo. But I mean, you could see I am growing plants with this. This could be an option if you just, you're on a low budget. Maybe you're not looking for the most intense thing. Maybe you want to grow out some Java moss like this. Well, you could use a simple spotlight like this to do so. Up here we have a Phoenix light. Now, this Phoenix light is on this tank for Lucky and his pal, which we still haven't named yet. And all in all, this light works well for this tank. The reason being is we don't have too many demanding plants in here. We have some Anubis, we have a red tiger lotus in the back here, we have a banana plant, which I don't know if the snails are eating it or what, or maybe the pleco, and then just some floating plants up top here, which, the light even gets blocked by those and things are still growing fine. So when it comes down to your light, it comes down to what you're trying to grow with it. In this tank, we're not really trying to grow much. We're just trying to keep things alive. We're not trying to speed up growth. We're not trying to grow anything intense. And all in all, that light's working. Now, if we go over to something like this, and we'll touch on what's over there in a bit, but this is a BML fixture from a company called Build My LED. BML is their name, and I don't know if you guys are going to be able to see it here just because of the ISO level. Let's see if I can brighten this. I can't brighten it on the fly. That sucks. Okay, anyway, this is a BML light. It's very intense, as you can see. Has reds and blues, has its own power converter and dimmer module also included, and it grows pretty much anything I put under it, it does well. Now we're even growing some algae right now in the 55. This tank I've let go a little bit since we wound up moving it out of the way to make room for this 75, which we're going to be touching on soon. Still more to come on that, so if you're new here, subscribe so you can check that out in the future. But yeah, so this is, you know, this light grows pretty much everything. It's super intense. The reason why I need a super intense light is because of how tall the tank is. So this tank is, I think, 24 inches, if I do remember, or 21 inches, something like that. To get light down that far, to be able to grow these really high demanding highlight plants, you need something really powerful. So this fixture is very expensive. I think it was about $350 to $400 when I bought it brand new, and it does the job well, but it is very expensive. So now, could I put, say, a fluval light like I have over here? Don't mind the box is a little bit of a mess going on right now, but as you can see, this is a fluval light growing perfectly fine. All these plants, these are high demanding plants. The only difference is this is a 40 breeder, so it's shorter from top to bottom than the 55 is. The 55 is much taller, so there's more water that the light needs to penetrate. This is running two fluval 2.0s, so it gets a nice even spread across all the plants, and all in all, it does pretty well. I mean, we have a little algae problem. That's actually probably nutrient levels, not necessarily lighting, but overall, pretty good. So pretty much lighting really comes down to what you're trying to grow. If you're trying to grow big demanding plants like this, you need to spend some money and get really good lighting. I do like these. The reason being is if I wanted to put this on, say, a low-tech tank, I could actually dim the lights. As you can see here, they're dimming. I could dim these all the way down, and I could grow low demanding lights and not have to worry about too much algae. Or I could brighten them up and keep them going. Now, there is a future light that I'm going to be testing out that is going to blow everything out of the water that I have here, even the Build My LED light. But for right now, you know, this is it. So look at the type of plants you're trying to grow. If you're trying to grow really basic stuff, easy stuff, you go with something like a Phoenix. You could go with like a fluorescent light. Or if you're trying to grow really high demanding stuff, Twin Star Light's pretty good. Or if you could find the BMLs maybe used from somebody, and that really comes down to lighting. So spend the most money you can on lighting first. Figure out the tank size, and then go with the proper light for the proper plants that you're trying to grow. Next up is substrate. This is by far probably the most asked question. What can I grow plants in? Can I use sand? Can I use gravel? What kind of plant to tank substrate should I get? And my answer is always the same. We're going to take it back to Lucky's tank. Lucky's tank is full white sand. There is no substrate underneath. I am growing plants that attach to rocks, also that drop their roots down into the substrate. Do I need planted tank substrate for this thing? No, because all the plants are able to grow under low fertilized conditions. They don't need tons of fertilizer. They grow super slow. They don't really need to have all that. With the exception of the red tiger lotus, the banana plant, and the dwarf aquarium lily that I have in the back, those will absorb nutrients like a hog. But the thing is, those are absorbing all the nutrients that come from the fish. Now, I do dose every once in a while using Vital, my plant fertilizer. We have these on our website, Vital, Vital X, or Thrive S, depending on the type of tank you have. But I do dose occasionally, maybe once a week, just to add extra vital nutrients in here, just to keep the plants looking healthy. All in all, they don't necessarily need it. They would still be fine even if I didn't dose. Now, in this particular tank, we're using Chem black substrate, not the sand, but it's a little more coarse texture. And this is meant for planted tank substrates, or this is meant for a planted tank. It is decent. It's probably not the best, but it's ideal for me. It's easy to get plants to stay down in them, and it provides them with a nice kind of coarse material for the plant's roots to grab hold, which will keep them healthier, allow them to absorb nutrients faster, and all that stuff. So this is another one that I use. In this tank, we have Chem Fluorite Red, or red clay. Now, this is just a red clay. It's very coarse. I honestly really don't like this substrate anymore, not for any reason why, other than it's just difficult to plant sometimes things in, and it doesn't look good in my opinion. I like a black substrate. I don't really like red. I did the red because it obviously has more clay content. It really helps the red plants. As you can see, many of the red plants in here are doing well, and it does work. I wish it was black. It would look better. better in my personal opinion, but it does work. So that's another one, and we use it on many tanks. This is another one. You can see here there's not a whole lot of light in this tank, but you can see that there is all the red clay substrate in here too. Another substrate that I use, this is actually Eco Complete mixed with a black diamond blasting sand, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to find any of the sand particles, but there is sandy bits in here. You might be able to see it here with the autos. There's a ton of this little sand here. Now that sand isn't ideal. It actually does not work for any like scaleless fish or bottom dwelling fish like cories or coolie loaches or anything like that. They get cut up by it, and I've lost fish because of it. And same thing with Eco Complete. Eco Complete is a little rough, but if you're not going to have any bottom dwelling fish or anything that's really sensitive, you can use it. Shrimp are fine with it and whatnot. A lot of people don't recommend Eco Complete. They think that it's not that good. I've had good experiences with it, but I'm sure there is better options, as many people claim, by other stuff, which we'll get into now. So next is aqua soil, and this is the Dragonstone Scape tank, which I'll show you guys in another video soon. But you can see we have a patch of aqua soil here, and it is growing plants phenomenally. Not to mention the light on this is super good, and it is growing as a immerse setup or dry star method, waiting to be flooded. Once we flood this, things will change and we'll see how it does, but you can see here things are growing fine. We're also using it in the Fluval Flex tank, and you can see here there's a ton of substrate in here, and things haven't quite filled out yet. This tank's only been set up for about 3 or 4 weeks now with the plants in there, and things are starting to come together, but it's going to take some time still. It doesn't carpet overnight. We're not running CO2 in this tank, so it does take a little bit longer, but things are growing. I do see new growth coming up, and aqua soil is probably the top of the line that you could do. But I also get asked, can you grow stuff in sand? And of course you can. I've grown stuff before in just sand. You can see here we have dwarf sedge. Now it hasn't grown out, but it hasn't died, which is a good thing. So it's going to do all right. The trick with sand though is you don't want to fine sand. If it's too fine and the particles can compact, you're actually going to kill the roots of the plant. They won't be able to absorb nutrients. They'll get suffocated, and roots like a coarse material. So if you're going to do sand, do a coarser sand with different grain sizes in it. With that said, if you do sand, make sure you pick up some Vital root tabs or any other sort of root tabs that you may prefer. These are ours. They work great. They're essentially topsoil and clay that you're putting into your substrate, which will allow your plants to grow, but you're not having a whole dirted substrate, so it doesn't give you the cons of that type of environment. Lastly but not least, it's really comes down to fertilization and nutrients available. Now, like I said with the Anubis and the Lucky's tank, you don't need nutrients for every plant. Some plants can just survive off what's in the water column by doing water changes, what fish produce as waste, and anything else that may be going into the tank, such as the fish food that you put in there. They may not necessarily eat it. It breaks down. It gives you all these different minerals that the plants can use. But it is vital, hence the name why we named our fertilizer Vital, that you do have a good nutrient content, especially when you're trying to grow more demanding plants, or when you have a fully planted jungle tank, because when you have tons of plants, they're all competing for nutrients. Now, I know this tank doesn't look the nicest here because we have all this writing on and it hasn't really been cleaned up, but if you had a tank that resembled this, just full of plants, these plants are going to be competing for vital nutrients that they need to grow, and if you don't have enough, or maybe you don't feed that often, or maybe you don't have enough fish waste or anything like that, your plants are going to suffer and they will be deficient. You'll be able to see signs of yellowing on leaves, holes in the leaves, just melt back, all that stuff. So you definitely want to use some sort of nutrients, whether that's mine, Vital, or Seachem, or anything else that you may see out there. Now, along with fertilization, I will also include CO2. Now, CO2 isn't needed only if you're growing high demanding plants, but if you're trying to grow really easy stuff like Crypts and Swords and Anubis and Vals and all these things, very basic stuff, you don't need CO2. Everybody's always thinking, oh, I need CO2. You only need CO2 for one of two reasons. Either you're trying to grow really hard to grow plants, high demanding plants, these are all these rare stems that I've shown you guys before in the past, or you're trying to grow plants quickly. So let's take a look at this. So once again, we'll come back to the Fluval Flex tank. Now, you will see that things haven't filled in yet. It has been roughly about a month, but they are growing. I do see new growth. But if I ran CO2, this tank would be exploding with growth. But I don't want that. I don't want to have to be trimming things every day. I don't want to have to be maintaining it all the time. With CO2 comes a lot of maintenance, so it's not always ideal for everybody. If you're just having 1 or 2 tanks, maybe you might want to run it. If you have more than that, trust me, it gets to be a problem having to maintain that many tanks, especially the plants, because like this vivipara here, this hairgrass that is, can't really see it because it's so dark in the tank right now because of all the tannins, but that plant grows like crazy. If I was to put CO2 in here, it would be covered with it. So I don't want to do that. I want to let it just grow naturally, get adjusted to this light, do well in these conditions. I think it will, and then we'll, you know, have a nice, just simple aquascape that I don't need to do so much maintenance to it. I'm also running a carpeting plant that you really don't need to trim, so that also helps. And all in all, this is essentially a high-tech environment minus CO2, because the light is pretty powerful on this, but I don't have to run CO2 and I'll still get plant growth. It just won't be as fast as some may want. With that said, when it comes to CO2, don't get the DIY CO2. So many people say it works and does things with it. Honestly, I've tried it. It does not work as ideal as a full setup would. Now, here's the problem with the DIY CO2. One, it's infrequent or inconsistent. You're going to have a bunch of fluctuations between too much or too little. That could be dangerous. It could kill your fish. Two, you're going to be replacing that about every week. It's such a pain in the butt. It doesn't just, like, it's not worth the money. It really isn't. So when it comes to CO2, when you do a full CO2 setup, you don't need a whole lot. You could do a 5-pound tank. That will last you probably 6 months to a year, as long as you're not running it on full blast, in which in most cases you won't be because you'll wind up gassing your fish. So as long as you keep it throttled down, that 5-pound container will last you months and months and months. So maybe a little bit of expense up front, so it's going to be a little costly, but in the long run, it's going to be easier to maintain. It's going to be more safe and more maintenance free than DIY method it's going to be. And honestly, I prefer a tank versus a DIY setup any day, because it just does not work. I've tried the citric acid method, I've tried the baking soda with the, I think it's the yeast. It just doesn't work, or whatever it is. It just, go with a real canister or real CO2 system if you're going to try and do it. But like I said, you do not need it unless you're trying to do those 2 things before. Alright guys, and that's the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. As always, hit that like button if you learned something new here, or if you think this is a good video people should watch if they're trying to get into planted tanks. Also, make sure you let them know, hey, this is a good video to watch, because that's what I'm primarily making this video for, is so that when I have people ask me, hey, what do you need to do, I can link them out to this. Hopefully they'll watch it. If they have more questions, they're more than welcome to message me, but I think this will cover the base of it and figure out what they want to do and all that. So I hope that you share it with your friends or other people that may be trying to get into the hobby, figuring out planted tanks. I think this is a good base point to start. They have a lot of different options. Also, leave me a comment down below if what your process is to setting up a new planted tank. Any other advice you'd give people, we'll leave it in the comments below, and then, you know, maybe start a discussion based on that. And I will see you guys on the next video. Subscribe here if you're new, and later.